Now, with racial tensions spilling over onto the streets in the United States and in fact around the world, this morning we'll examine the role of satire in dealing with some of these complex social issues. Coconut Kelz is a fictional character created by comedian Lesego Tlhabi. Now, Kelz describes herself as a privileged white woman trapped in the body of a black person. Now, she comments on social and political issues with a heavy dose of humor. In fact, let's take a look at one of those recordings.
How's it, guys? I just have one question for you. How dare you? How dare you? She was 14 years old, okay? 14. And everybody knows that racism is a side effect of white puberty. It goes childhood, adolescence, racism, teenagehood, and then adulthood. And racism again. So how can you be mad at biology? I mean, are you mad at maths? No. So why are you mad at biology? It's just facts. The most important thing out of all of this is that she's forgiven herself. So you can't even be mad once someone forgives themselves. Think about it. The problem isn't even so-called racist tweets. It's actually the digging up, the excavation of old tweets. I mean, are you an archaeologist? Are you Homo naledi? Anyway, stop looking to the past. I mean, our heads don't even go all the way around, you know, like, ow. We're not owls. And what you guys don't even know is that we went to racism camp when we were 15 and we prayed it away. Amen.
All right, so the material for Coconut Kelz deals with the injustice of racial inequalities in society. This morning, of course, we want to find out what life has been like under lockdown for Coconut Kelz, her views on the protests in the U.S., as well as white privilege and many other issues for that. We'll also speak to the woman behind this character. But first, Coconut Kelz joins us now via Skype. Coconut Kelz, it's great to speak to you. You know, that video that we've just shown was of Bianca Shumbi. Now, she's the Miss SA candidate, and things didn't necessarily turn out well for her. I wonder what you have to make of the reaction to that moment and everything else that's happened since then. What's your take?
Well, we've been doing marches around the country, protests, if you will, to protest her being cancelled from Miss SA because she's the one who's going to take over. You know, we've had a black Miss SA, forgot her name, Zintle, Zizo. And so we're tired of that. That's not what South Africa looks like. That's not the representation of SA. Blonde little girls like me don't even know that they're beautiful. Do you know that? Because for years we've been told we're not enough. So it's time for a blonde Miss SA, and we're leading the front with Bianca. She is our Miss SA.
Wow, okay, all the best with that. I'm actually surprised you're not even at an All Lives Matter rally. Thanks very much for making time for us. I hope, okay, so there you go, still fully within. Give us some of your thinking behind what's happening in the U.S. as well. Do you think there's space for you and, I guess, some of your supporters in those protests?
You know what? I just think we're just protesting everything now. Like, everything is just such a big deal. And it's not like that big a deal that George died, because if you think about it, it's just one more criminal off the streets. We're safer for it. So I just think people need to stop complaining, because the cop actually did his job. What are cops supposed to do other than kill people? Okay? That's what they have to do. And, well, only black people.
Right.
But nonetheless, they're supposed to get the criminals off the street. And whether or not George committed a crime, it's in his DNA to be a criminal at some point. So even if he wasn't a criminal then, he'd be a criminal in the future, and we're just getting him off the streets and making the streets safer. Now I can go to America in peace knowing that there's no criminals.
Well, I mean, the fact that you're still largely perceived as a black woman, I think many people will disagree with that.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I'm not black, I'm transracial.
Ah, of course. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for that clarity. Let's bring it back home as well. Look, there's a lot of talk around the lockdown regulations, right? The government is going to court, appealing some of those rulings. Do you think that's actually something that they're likely to win? I mean, is government getting the lockdown right?
They're not getting the lockdown right. This is actually vodka. Since bottle stores are open, I've been drinking all day, like no matter what.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't agree with lockdown regulations at all, just because they come from the ANC. I mean, they might be smart, but if they come from the ANC, we can't agree with them. That's our job as the DA, to deny everything. If they say the world is round, we're flat earthers. If they say Black Lives Matter, we say all lives matter. It's just our job.
Sure, okay. And do you think you're getting that job right so far? I mean, are people being convinced that the DA is the way to go?
Yes, 89% of South African white people agree with us. So,
Yeah,
and
okay.
89% of white people is 89% of the economy. So if you think about it, yeah, they agree with us. 100% of South Africans agree with us.
Okay, all right. We'll see what many of them have to say. They're really responding in the ways through which we know how, and this is through social media. Let me speak to, I guess, the person behind some of your brilliance, Coconut Kelz, and that, of course, is Lesego Tlhabi. Lesego, I mean, this is, an incredible time in the world, really, I think it's quite safe to say, especially around issues to do with race and the like. Is it difficult for you as Lesego to be saying some of the stuff that you say as Coconut Kelz? I mean, I really do sometimes even struggle to maintain any kind of composure, cringing at some of the stuff that Coconut Kelz is saying at times.
Well, because I know who I am versus Coconut Kelz, it's not difficult per se. But like, for instance, this interview today, I was like, I don't know if the timing is right because everything's happening in America, and I just watched George Floyd's funeral yesterday, and it was just like horrible for me. So I didn't know if it wasn't maybe off the mark to maybe make those kind of jokes or to those comments. But I also knew that actually in this morning I woke up, I was like, okay, satire is a tool. It's supposed to make people uncomfortable. It's supposed to attack the very, very uncomfortable discussions around race in the world. And I'd be doing myself a disservice as Kelz if I don't use the opportunity to show people their prejudice and their ignorance, because that's what Kelz is. She's kind of like a mirror up to the more ignorant of society, to say what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're posting is not right, and you need to interrogate why you say and think these things. And sometimes the only way people actually get to think and interrogate is by looking at Kelz. People will say, oh my God, I didn't realize how ridiculous it was until I saw you say it. Or I didn't realize how racist it was until it was in a Kelz video. Because obviously, if it's in a Kelz video, if it's Kelz's opinion, it's the wrong opinion.
Right. So if you find yourself agreeing with Coconut Kelz, you probably need to check yourself, right?
And this is your stance, then you're on the wrong side of history.
And look, in many respects, to get that right takes an incredible amount of skill, right? There's such a fine balancing act that you need to tread, and not only during this period, I think, I'd argue, at any other period as well. I mean, what kind of thinking goes into putting together, for instance, a Kelz comment, for lack of a better term? I mean, is it something that you're researching deeply upon? Are you just tapping into your own lived experience? Because I know some of the recollections must come from, moments you've shared with some people who've expressed these views.
Yeah, I think Kelz is like all the white girls I went to school with. So it's very much the character is based on lived experiences. But some of the things that she says, I literally see on social media from more conservative pages. So I have like aliases that I go into different pages, neighborhood watch groups, the DA support page or whatever it is, just to see the kind of comments that come from the more conservative or the more right-wing people in the country and the world. So that's where some of my comments are actually verbatim. People think it's an exaggeration, which I do in terms of my acting. But in terms of what I say, some of those comments I really have seen. So it's just picking up comments here and there. And I think because people know someone like Kelz, or they are Kelz, it's very difficult for me to cross the line, because I don't speak about issues around GBV. I don't speak about rape. I don't speak about murder. There's certain things where I stay away from. And I speak, like, for instance, George Floyd. I wouldn't make fun or do the social commentary on the actual act of kneeling on someone, because that's very difficult to toe the line. But the reactions to George Floyd, the reactions to the protests, those are the things I make sort of comments on. So it's easy to stay out of sticky situations because I'm commenting on people, not necessarily on incidents.
Yeah, it's so interesting you make that exact example, because we are learning this morning of a school in Kailami, Pinnacle College, where a teacher, we understand, actually made that very joke about kneeling on some of the pupils' necks if they don't complete their tasks in time. But sadly, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for coming through. The work that you're doing is certainly adding to the ongoing conversations, not only in this country, but certainly everywhere else in the world. That there is Lesego Tlhabi. She's the brains, I'd like to say, behind the brilliance that is Coconut Kelz. Certainly appreciate your time.